You have 15 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Commission has been provided with my research report, Profiteering in the Name of Culture. Included with this report are a number of documents, one being a submission that I spearheaded by Cable Watch, filed to the CRTC on May 20th, 1996, as well as a related decision made by the CRTC on June 25th, 1996, a highly unorthodox decision that has never been made public. It concerns the authority of the CRTC to require Canadian consumers to pay a surcharge in the cost of cable TV in order to subsidize private cable television and production companies. The CRTC ruled on June 25, 1996, in its unpublished decision, that Parliament had granted the Commission the authority to require consumers to pay a surcharge to fund subsidies to cable television and production companies. However, at the same time, the CRTC also ruled that the consumers being required to pay the subsidies were not entitled to notice that they were being required to pay the subsidies to the companies or the monthly cost of the subsidies that they were being required to pay to the companies. This undemocratic regulatory scheme has continued to the present day. A conservative estimate of the redistribution of wealth under this program is more than $1.3 billion since January 1995. The CRTC has refused to provide me with additional information to enable a more precise amount to be calculated, but the information does exist and is available to the Commission. This is the third time that I've appeared before the CRTC to address this issue. It is still my position that Canadian consumers were deliberately misled, that influential corporations were unjustly enriched, that several government policies were violated by the CRTC, and that Canadians are entitled to be told the truth about this company subsidy program. I'm here to simply direct your attention to the documents that I've placed on the public record and ask you to put an end to the deceptive practice. I strongly recommend a judicial review of this issue. Furthermore, CRTC legal counsel Cherie Fisher notified me last August that the Commission had destroyed the unpublished decision on March 27, 2006. Ms. Fisher refused to identify who at the Commission had authorized the destruction of the unpublished decision or why it had been destroyed at that particular time. Weeks before the decision was shredded, my legal counsel notified Stephen Harper, Gilles Duceppe, Jack Layton, and Jim Harris of the unpublished decision where it was contained in file 1000-121 and evidence of potential illegal activities related to the company subsidy program. Earlier today, I launched a website, mediascam.com, the purpose of which is to raise awareness of this outstanding issue for interested parties. I thank you for the time, and I am open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahar, and for your submission and your presentation here today. For the record, you do refer to this unpublished decision a number of times, both in your oral presentation and here this afternoon. An unpublished decision is not a decision until, a decision is not a decision until it is published. None of us were at the Commission in 1996, so I don't know what the genesis of this letter is or why this decision was never published. But it's not a decision until it is published. I just wanted to put that on the record. You're quite a researcher, so I'm going to assume that you have read some of the submissions or perhaps all of the submissions on this file.
Oh, on the
CTF file, on what we're here to discuss this week.
I'm a researcher on the issue that I put forward to you, and I'd also like to note that I actually have a copy of that destroyed decision. I put a copy of that destroyed decision as an appendix, so it exists. So you can comment on that comment. Just because it's destroyed doesn't mean it never existed. So everyone is actually posted on my website. I am willing to talk about what the implications are, and that's. I mean, if you don't want to, I acknowledge that. I'm just here to say that it's there for everyone that wants to look at it. And I also want to say that the commissioners here today and on the commission for the last little while inherited this issue. This was not your decision to make this decision. It is in my estimation it is the worst decision ever made, but it's not your decision. You have a problem, and it's just it is a fact that that's what it is, and it's on the record. Thank you.
Mr. Mahar, do you support the principles of the CTF?
I support the not as it's structured now. I support the principle of subsidies coming through Parliament. I think when you look at the math of this partnership, Professor Joel Backen from UBC, who wrote the corporation, made some very derogatory comments about partnerships between industry and government not being not being good for democracy. And I think when you look at partnerships, you have to have something coming from one of the partners. And, each partner has to bring something to the table. What happened in this case was all that the cable companies brought to the table was that they were allowed by the CRTC to collect funds under false pretense as long as they gave 50% of those funds to this fund. They're not a legitimate partner in it. So I'd say that I'd support even more money being given to production companies. I'd change it though from non-repayable grants, which is free money, to some kind of investment, equity investment, where you know that they're not coming to you before all other parties. It is actually triggering production as opposed to subsidizing greater wealth for production companies. So I support that. I'd actually like to see the scope expanded to community channel, because I personally believe that concentration of media is a problem, and you've just had a hearing on that a while ago. And I think that if some of this money could be put to local production, that you'd have more diversity, and I think you'd have a better broadcasting system. But I don't believe that there's no logical or mathematical reason for cable to be involved as a broadcasting distribution undertakings to be involved, because what happens is, say you charge, say it's 5% or 10% of the revenues. That money is passed along to consumers. It's not shared, it's passed along. But the problem is, as it's passed along, it is now embedded in the cost of the service. So those ratepayers, whether they know about it or not, are now paying GST and PST on top of the cost of that embedded contribution. And so I think what has to happen is that there's no reason for that to happen. As long as it's a sound policy, then it can stand the scrutiny of Parliament. All this money should come from Parliament, and it should be that's the way such a fund should be directed. And I think that the composition of such funds has been a problem since day one, because all the industry, all the stakeholders that were actually benefiting from the fund have been on the fund. Consumers have paid for it without their knowledge, and they've been excluded from even being on as stakeholders. So I think that there are groups out there, whether it's Consumer Association of Canada or Public Interest Advocacy Centre, but there has to be some kind of legitimate representation of consumer interests on such boards. So that's what I put forward.
Over the last 2 years, the Department of Canadian Heritage has committed $120 million to the CTF. Do you think that's an adequate amount?
It depends on, it's not just an adequate amount on amount of money spent into production. I think you have to look at if they're non-repayable grants. I have no idea whether those productions could have actually gone to other sources and got equity investment, and you could use that money more effectively to actually trigger more productions elsewhere. So it's impossible to say, and I'm not an expert on that in any shape or form. What I do know is the math of being a partner and forcing consumers to pay this and then pay taxes on top of it it's just inefficient. And I would also add that, I've gone through some of the files, and there's some great shows, entertaining shows that have been funded. So I think people get caught up thinking, oh, this is a great show, this is very good. But some of them are internationally sold. So I look at that and think, why is that show that's very successful necessarily need funding where other shows that maybe genres that aren't as popular? So I know there's a push to make popular shows, but I just wonder whether that makes sense or not.
Do you think that the list of genres that qualify for CTF funding should be expanded?
I do. I admit to a bias. Like, we all have our biases, and I would admit that the process I've gone through trying to talk to politicians and actually trying to have an impact on policy, I think that the investigative reporting is drastically underfunded in this country, and I think that if a fund could give out programming where consumers or citizens actually feel more empowered, or they're more active involved in the community because they're getting information. It's not just about drama. It's not just about children's shows. It's really about engaging Canadians in Canada that's from my perspective.
And if the fund were to only be funded through parliamentary appropriation, do you believe that private broadcasters should be able to access the fund?
To be honest, my background was with CHUM and Canadian Satellite Communications. It wasn't in programming; it was in cable, and it's just I think that if I don't really have an opinion, I can't. I don't have the expertise to comment on that.
Okay, fair enough. If my colleagues have any additional questions. No. Well, thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Mahar.
Thank you.
We will take a 15-minute break now.